Richard Skipper celebrates. Every show is a celebration. Each show, Richard delivers the artists you love, showcasing what makes them unique. Never gossipy. The antidote to a sometimes hectic world. Now, here's your host, Richard Skipper.
Happy holidays, everybody, and welcome to Richard Skipper Celebrates. I got a little festive today because when you've got Shelly Goldstein in the house, you have to get festive. For we need a little Shelly right this very minute. How are you all doing? Really? I mean, it's been some year, hasn't it? And now here we are, whether we like it or not, the holidays are careening right in our direction. But we've got a lot of cheer today because we've got Shelly Goldstein. I'm so excited she's here. For those of you who have been here before, thank you for coming back. And for those of you who are here for the first time, my show is all about celebrating artists and their body of worth. And our guest today is always worth celebrating. Now, before I bring her on, I'm going to give all of you a little taste of Shelly. Enjoy this clip, and then Shelly and I will see you on the other side.
You say the number of votes won't determine when you walk away. Your views, the amount of the count will not count if it says you will lose. Sure, you'll scream. You famously have a fixation to threaten attacks, but whatever your scheme, the day of the inauguration, you'll have to face facts. You'll be gone. Can't ignore when Bill bars disbarred, can't bar the door. While you rant, scream to Fox, they will pack your things and change the locks. Stocks will rise as you crash. You'll be out so fast you'll get whiplash. No more constant mayhem. And no longer will the USA serve as your private ATM. Dun 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 dun. There won't be campaign rallies where disciples swoon. You're done with fuzzy valentines from Kim Jong-un. You think it's entertaining, the pain your reign is reigning, the infinite complaining, disdaining and profaning, the hating, the baiting, dictating that you're instigating. You'll be gone, no more plague. They'll be waiting for you at The Hague. No more racist red meat in the tweets you bleat as you excrete. Ex-commander-in-chief, one last time they'll play Hail to the Thief. And while you decompress, New York State and Andrew Cuomo will be phoning up the IRS. Gonga gong gong gong, gonga 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 gong. Everybody, gonga gong, gonga 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 gong gong gong. 'Cause you gotta vote, ba 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 ba.
Here she is, a kitten with a quip. How are you, Shelly? Groovy, Shelly.
I wore my Christmas jammies for you.
Well, I got into red. When I saw that you were wearing something red, I says, I have to get a little festive with you. I want to ask you, as I do with all of my shows, because there is a little thing going on outside this little realm that we're in right now called the pandemic. How are you dealing really with all of this?
Covering my body in this stuff, swigging it on occasion. You know something? I really have gone nowhere since about, I don't know, St. Patrick's Day, something like that.
In here.
I am definitely, 1 to 10, 10 being you never, ever, ever leave. I'm 9.8, and I think, and when I am outside, sometimes really early in the morning, I'll go for a little walk. I am masked. I have gloves with me. I have sanitizer with me. I'm just being super, super, super careful. And not just because I'm, a neurotic little Jewess. It's because there are people who are literally killing themselves every single day to save other people. And, we owe it to them. For people who are working 96-hour shifts to try to keep people from, to keep their breathing, to keep their lungs from collapsing, or losing limbs or things like that, slapping a little piece of fabric on your face is nothing. It's nothing. So it's something we all have to do. And I was just watching Papa Joe, who's coming in 29 days.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just so nice hearing someone who speaks in sentences and, understands what compassion is and isn't trying to torture.
Let me ask you a question regarding this. I mean, before, I have found that for myself, the last 5 years have pushed me out there more politically than I've ever been at any given time in my life. Have you always been political, or are you in the same situation that I'm in? Is it the current administration that has done this to you?
Do you know the movie Garbo Talks with
Yes.
Croft? That's kind of my mother. Mix that with Auntie Mame, and you've got my mother. And she raised me to pay attention to the world, to look past, the minor and look at the bigger picture and take care of people and to respond with kindness and compassion. And, that somehow has become political.
Mm-hmm.
She also taught me what I think is the greatest lesson in the world, which is being religious has nothing practical to do with how often you are in a church or a synagogue or a mosque. If you want to do that, that's fine. It's great. It's wonderful. Do it. But what you do outside of a house of worship is how you show your faith. And you don't have to, and then that counts for agnostics and atheists as well. It's what we do in the world.
Over the weekend, I was interviewing Peter Danish and Rita Harvey. They have a new CD called Simple Prayers for Challenging Times. And what they've gone in and they've taken elements of all religions and put them into these great songs. And as I was talking to both of them, for me, religion, since you've taken us in this direction, is all about the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And I think that if we all live that way, with a little bit more empathy towards one another, it would really change the world on its axis.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, since we're talking politics, here's a sneaky little segue. This won't matter to most people, but tonight in Chicago, and I think much of the Midwest, on the PBS station in Chicago, WTTW, Channel 11, they are debuting a wonderful award-winning documentary called Lincoln is Crying, The Grifters, Grafters, and Governors of Illinois. And it's about what I like to call Illinois' deep dish corruption. We don't have time for thin crust corruption. We do real corruption. And when the movie was first made, it was 4 of the last 6 governors were in prison or had been in prison. Now it might be 4 of the last 7, but I'm not sure. But the film ends with the Gay Men's Chorus of Chicago singing a parody of the state song of Illinois, and each verse is about a different governor that's gone to prison, and I wrote the lyric. So I'm really proud of that.
Who else? Now, are you originally from Chicago?
I'm a Chicago girl. Everyone thinks I'm from New York, which is like, she's funny and she's Jewish. She must be from New York. But a few of us ended up in Chicago, and that's where my family ended up. And yes, I'm born and raised there.
Well, let me ask you a question since you're from there. What is it about Chicago with corruption? I mean, when you think of all the 1930s and all the gangsters that came out of Chicago, and, what is it?
I think it's the weather. It's so cold there. A Tommy gun releases a certain amount of heat. And that was in 1929. That was sort of the best the closest thing.
Where the expression "packing the heat" comes from?
Exactly. There were no electric socks then, so John Dillinger and Al Capone improvised. And I don't know.
Well, I'm glad you took us to Chicago, because I like to start my interviews by going back to the 5-year-old self. 5-year-old Shelly Goldstein. That was before you had been encumbered with peer pressure in school and everything. What was your life like at 5 years old? Brothers, sisters, mom, dad? I'd like to get the whole Megillah.
It's funny that you say that, because peer pressure. I started nursery school at 3, and there's a somewhat famous story where I apparently came home from my first day of nursery school. And this is the sort of sentence that if you tell it to a shrink, they know they can buy that summer home that they've been thinking about. I said to my mother, she said, how was school? And I said, I made a new friend. And she said, oh, really? What did she say to you? And I said, go away. So by 5, I was already mired in the neurosis that, fuels this little Energizer bunny of neuroses that is me. I was very much, I'm sorry to say this, much like I am now, in that I started performing at a very, very, very young age. I used to, when my parents and my aunts and uncles were together, they'd put on a record and I would sing along with it or act it out, or, I was a terrible, terrible ham from the get-go.
Did anyone else in your family have that bent?
My mother, here, let me show you. Here, look at this. This is my glorious mother. And
wow.
Beautiful and laughing and all that sort of thing. She sang like Judy Garland. She was a much better singer than I am, and stunningly beautiful. She looked like Elizabeth Taylor, and really fun. And she made life fun. And my father, I recently found out, I never knew this before, because my father was the word used to be square. He was very sort of sweet and old-fashioned and kind and wonderful. But he was, as a child, a piano virtuoso. And I only found that out recently when this picture was discovered, where I think he looks like George Gershwin a little bit.
Yes, absolutely.
And I never knew that about him, because he would sing as well, but he had a terrible voice, but it was fabulous. It was just delightful, because he'd, walk around the house and say, gonna buy a paper doll that I could go buy, things like that. And my parents were fun. And I had a big sister who was stuck with me. And we were very right brain, left brain. And she never quite got me, but she's a wonderful big sister and I adore her.
And what was the age difference between you and your sister?
7 years older than I am.
I'm sorry?
7 years older than I am. So when she was 13 and wanted to hang out with her friends, she had to bring me along. So another famous family story is she once brought me into the middle of a neighborhood street and she just sort of like this, pointed, and she said, "This is where you're supposed to play." And then she went back to her friends.
I think you and I had the same sister.
No, she's wonderful. She's amazing. I love her. But I'll just never forget that, because this is where you're supposed to play.
Oh dear God.
That lasted about a minute. And come on, come here. But if you were 13 and you're just sort of hanging out with your friends and having a good time and noticing people that make your heart go pitty pat. You don't want your 6-year-old little sister hanging out with you, singing, Elvis songs or whatever I was doing, show tunes.
Now, growing up in Chicago, were you arts and education is something that, as you know, I'm very passionate about. Were you exposed to the arts in school?
Oh my God, yes. Oh my God, absolutely. I was the luckiest kid in the world. I went to Evanston Township High School and then to Northwestern, both in Evanston, Illinois. We had a spectacular arts department, spectacular theater, music, band, orchestra, dance, mime, painting, sculpting, stunning. The students, when we were there, built a studio theater, which is still in operation. And they did it in ways that now would put the school in prison, because there were kids like welding without a helmet and things like that, and putting up flies, without like a bungee cord or a net, But yeah, it was. And then at home, because of, as I say, the anti-MAME side of my mother, we would listen to records together and sing, and every musical record that they had, that from the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, we would absorb them, inhale them.
And what was that pivotal moment in your life where everything changed and you said, this is the path that I'm going to be on?
Well, that's an interesting way of putting it, because quite honestly, the one thing I never understood with my friends growing up is when they would say things like, I don't know what I want to do. Because it wasn't a question of deciding this is what I want to do. It's what I always did. And then I sort of realized, oh, there might be a way to get paid to do this. But I started performing when I was 7. I wrote my first play when I was 7. I think the bravest thing I ever did is when I was a sophomore in college. I was asked to audition for a play, and I didn't get it, but it was this theater company in Chicago, and they had a touring company that was going out with 2 original musicals, and they wanted to cast me in it. And I was very timid, and I thought, wow, I'm having the opportunity to take the next 6 months, had to tell my parents, leave school, and literally get in this sort of Partridge Family bus and travel around the South and the Midwest and the East Coast and do these shows. And it was very emotional, because my parents were actually very cool about it. But shortly after I left, my father was diagnosed with melanoma.
Oh, I'm sorry.
This was about halfway into the tour. And then when I came back and went back to school, he was hospitalized and very, very ill, and he died several months later. So
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so that was kind of not fun, but both of them totally supported me, totally believed in me. It shows really the power of neurosis, that I'm that self-loathing, given the fact that I had wonderful, loving parents,
And who was the first mentor that came along that convinced you once again that you had what it takes for this business?
I had a lot of wonderful teachers. There was one teacher in particular who I absolutely adored, whose name was Brent Neff at Evanston High School. And he was kind of a male Gene Brody. And he had a cadre of students, of which I was the only girl. And they were sort of his special students. And we would do the announcements, over the loudspeaker at school, and just did special. He was a television production teacher. And they had the equipment at my school at the time was sort of like the leftover from the Dumont network, before the war, so we had like oatmeal box cameras and things like that. But he was a great, great teacher and a great friend. And he was so good to me and really believed in me. And unfortunately, I'm sorry, a lot of these stories end sadly. He was one of the very first casualties of AIDS.
Oh, I'm sorry.
A spectacular man. Fun, funny, smart, loving. And again, over the years, I mean, I had a hard right wing, buzz cut. Again, he always looked like it was the 50s. A teacher in junior high who was just, as hard right as you could, but a man of great compassion and great love. And he taught us civics, and he taught us, political science, and as much as you can to 10-year-olds, But he was so, he always said that our job was to, again, the big picture, the world at large, the country, people, and to care for each other. I mean, once upon a time, there was a time where you could disagree politically and still share humanity and compassion. Hopefully that will come back.
I hope so. Now, you said earlier that you realized at a very early age that you could actually get paid for this.
Yes.
What was the first time that you actually got paid to do your work?
Oh, it's funny because my friend Kyle Hefner, who I went to Northwestern with, was also a part of this job. The first real job I got was, it was very Sesame Street kind of thing. And ironically, it was connected with WTTW, the PBS station in Chicago that tonight is broadcasting Lincoln is Crying. Isn't that funny? I was about 11, and I was hired to be in it was a circle of kids who were different ethnicities. And it was very sort of, we are the world, we are the children. And every kid had a line, and it was like, if you're the only black kid on your block, well, if you're the only white kid on your block, well, if you're the only Chinese kid on your block, this is 1970s dialogue. And guess what my line was? If you're the only
Jewish girls,
close. If you're the only rich kid on your block, again, that was the code.
That was the code. Yes.
And it's just, we're all friends. We can all be friends, and another. So yeah, I actually got paid to do, that was my first, it was a PSA, but commercial,
Now, did you have opportunities performing in Chicago all through your high school and college years?
Oh yeah, I did a lot of local and the Chicago theater in those days was unbelievable. I remember the very first time I went to Second City, there was a new cast, and I was sneaked in because I was studying there, because I wasn't old enough to drink by many years. But the new cast was John Candy, Bill Murray, Betty Thomas, David Rashi, I can't remember, I think Deb Harmon, just these extraordinary talents. And I studied there for years. And I wrote a play that got produced in Chicago. I wrote it with a dear, wonderful man, Jerry Hazelmeyer. And we produced it ourselves in a tiny little theater in the sort of off-loop theater district, which would be the equivalency of off-Broadway in Chicago. And we were supposed to run for 6 weeks, and we ran for about 2 years.
Wow.
And in that process, and I was in it because I had written a part for myself because I was tired of producers telling me that there wasn't a part for anybody who looked like me. So I created a character who looked like me.
Now, what did they mean by that?
I was always, again, I hate to keep coming back to this, but a lot of times it was just, I was perceived as being too Jewish looking for things. But I was always too tall, too short, too this, And so that's why I started writing, was because I wanted to see characters that I wasn't seeing. And every character in this play was based on somebody that I or Jerry knew. And my life changed tremendously because while we were doing the show, Gary Marshall had been made aware of me when I was at Northwestern, thanks to another brilliant friend and professor, Bob Picerni. And Gary came to see the play, and there was a writer's strike happening in Los Angeles. And the day the strike ended and things went back to work, he called me and he said, "You're ready, pack your bags, come to California. I'm putting
you answered my next question. I was going to ask,
Yeah.
You could have gone to New York or you could have gone to California, but you knew that this was the right fit for you.
Well, I mean, when Gary Marshall calls and offers you a job,
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing. And so that totally changed my life, and I'm eternally grateful to him.
And
he
what was the
great.
project that you were writing for?
I was on staff at the very, very end of Laverne and Shirley. And then after that, I wrote a pilot for Norman Lear. And then right after that, Gary Marshall and Norman Lear both got out of television. And I always thought it was me. I don't know. But Gary started making movies, and Norman started traveling the country with People for the American Way and bringing the Declaration of Independence to people. And
well, you mentioned two very iconic men in television who pretty much shaped television in the 70s, both of them. What one thing did you learn from each of those that you have carried throughout your entire career?
Don't be a jerk. That's kind of it. It's like there's this perception, particularly in a lot of comedy, that the nastier you are, somehow the more talented you are. And those two men personified the diametric opposite of that philosophy.
Where does that come from? I mean, that's new to me because
that's the $1 million question. I mean, again, your perspective of the world, some of it's nature, some of it's nurture, some of it's what happens to you as you're traveling the road, and exactly who and what beat you about the head, with a broken bottle, and how you come out of all of that, because it happens to everybody. It's just your perspective. Mm-hmm. And if you're, we are seeing now the poison of the cumulative poison of 4 years of someone who has no moral compass whatsoever, mm-hmm. and how it's hurt all of us. It's like having just a tiny little bit of poison every day. And,
So when both of those men went in different directions with their career, mm-hmm. what compelled you to stay in Los Angeles?
Well, my sister was here, and she was she was no longer bringing me into the street. She was a great mentor and supporter. We actually moved my mother here because my father had died, mm-hmm. And my mother had been ill. She survived cancer, and we wanted her to be here. So this is where our family was now. And I was working. I had many ups and downs, many lean years, many fat years, but this is where my work was.
Was it an easy transition for you to make from Chicago to Los Angeles?
It was being thrown headfirst into the deep end. And I think that was good because it saved a lot of time of, what do I really want to do? Where should I go? How should I do it? If Gary hadn't come into my life when he did, it's probably a safe bet that I would have stayed in Chicago, writing plays there and performing there. And that would have been lovely, mm-hmm. But it's just, I ended up here, and that's been great too,
And where was your first apartment or home in Los Angeles?
Ooh. It was in West LA. I lived there way too long. I lived there for 25 years, and I should have. It was not the greatest apartment at one point.
Are you still right in LA proper?
Yeah, it was on the west side of LA, and I realized at one point that the carpeting didn't have floor underneath it. It had like a big dirt hole under it, filled with insects and vermin. So it was that kind of apartment, and that's where I was when the 1994 Northridge earthquake happened, and some dishes that were in my kitchen ended up in my living room, which was a 270 angle trip. So
I can't even imagine what the experience was. I mean, was that your first earthquake?
It was first that big. And you never forget when it's that big. No. But it was like being in a Roadrunner cartoon, and the whole world was going like this, and you're just, when's this going to stop? it lasted for a long time, which maybe means 30 seconds or something. But when the entire place is, and all you're hearing is car alarms going off and glass smashing, it's kind of surreal.
Now, I want to go back to Gary Marshall for a moment. When you were working on Laverne and Shirley, how many writers were on the show at that time?
About 450, something like that. I mean, there seriously about maybe a dozen. Some only came in a few days a week. Some only came in for the table. There were so many writers that I never had an office. I shared the reception area of an office with another younger writer. And we were, as I say, in the reception area of a guy who was a very unpleasant guy who had just been invited back a couple years earlier. He had set fire to his office.
Oh my God.
And they decided, bygones, let's bring him back in. And my very, very first day, I was told to come up with some story ideas, and I was very nervous because I didn't know what pitching was. I didn't know what story ideas were. And this guy could see me working, and he said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Everybody's at lunch." I said, "Yeah, but I have to do these stories." And he said, "Well, what are they?" And I said, "Well, I said, I don't want to bother you." And he said, "No bother. Let me hear your two stories." And I thought, wasn't that nice? This very kind of scary guy is listening to me, because again, day one, I had been in Hollywood for 3 hours at this point. And I told him my first story, and he said, "I don't have time to tell you how bad that is and how many problems this has. Because what else you got?" And I gave him my second story, and he said, "Okay." He goes, "You should go get some lunch, because you can't do anything with these two stories. They're horrible. And just go get some food." So I ran out from my office into the streets of Paramount, and I was weeping, and I'm thinking, I'm going to be back home in 3 days. I don't know what I'm doing. What I didn't know is while I was out there doing that, he went into the producer's office and sold the two stories.
Oh my God. Wow.
Yeah. So that was day one.
Well, if you start at the top, you're certain to drop. Oh my God, Kelly.
And I remember going to see this very nice older writer who was a much older writer. And he'd written for Lucy and Jack Benny and things like that. And I explained the story to him, and I said, "What do I do?" And he said, "Keep me out of it." And I said, I wasn't looking to put you in it. I was just looking what to do.
Well, if you're going to start there, who do you learn to trust in this business, or do you not trust anyone?
Well, you trust your gut. And Gary Marshall, not related to this particular story, but he said something that I've come back to many times. And he used to say this to me all the time. And he would say, "Shelly, I've known writers over the years who have this one story, and that's the story they're going to sell. And they pitch it, and they pitch it, and they pitch it, and they pitch it. And for whatever reason, it doesn't sell." And he said, "But you have to have, 12 ideas or 25 ideas or 150 ideas, and you have to, keep going at it." And he said, "So if someone, steals your idea and it's the only thing you've ever come up with, you're done. But if all they can do is steal, you keep creating." So it's not an easy thing, because creation of any kind isn't always easy, but that's what we do. I mean, if you're an artist, you paint or you dance or you cook or you sing or, whatever, or write a poem, and you just got to keep doing it.
I had an interview with Carol Lawrence, and she said, being in this business is the greatest elixir in the world. The more you get, the more you want. Mm-hmm. But the real rub is whether or not the buying public wants to buy it.
Very true.
And obviously, you had something even then that has sustained you all these years. Going back to that very beginning and that major bump in the road, do you feel nostalgic at all for those days? Or do you feel that those days really solidified who you truly are in this business?
Well, I mean, whenever I'm on that particular lot, it's almost like being back at school. My nephew was working on the lot there, and I went and had lunch with him, and he was sort of showing me around, and I was like, "Hey, kid, I was on this lot before you were born, sonny," But I was so proud of him, I look at everything as it's just, until whatever's going to get us gets us, we're all just trying to move forward and trying to get stuff made. And as I say, I've had a really odd career because I've had great success and I've had incredible failures, and that's what it is, So it's just never, as I say, there's never been a moment where it's been, well, maybe I should go sell spatulas,
Have you ever had to do that? I mean, seriously, have you ever had a job that was not in this business?
Well, I've had temporary jobs. Right after I finished the job at Paramount, that Christmas or the following Christmas, I was selling musical toothbrushes at a big department store in Westwood, and so I'd stand there and sing the song with the toothbrush, and sold one to Alan Alda. That was as good as it got.
Mm-hmm.
But so I've had silly little things like that, but really no. I mean, I've never waited a table. I've never had for a very short time. I was a temp receptionist in some offices, and I was sort of like Roz Russell and Mame. I mean, it wasn't a switchboard like that, but it was not my milieu. And
now, let me ask you, because you just went in that direction again a moment ago. What do you consider the high point in your career thus far? And what do you consider the lowest point you had? And how did you get through it?
There have been a few. I worked with Steve Martin, helping punch up one of his scripts. That was... Making that guy laugh is pretty spectacular. That's sort of about as good as it gets. One of the best jobs I've ever done, I didn't get a penny for. And that was, it's funny that you mentioned Carol Lawrence, because she's a Northwestern girl. 2 years ago, Northwestern had a huge fundraiser, $10 million fundraiser for a new theater department. And it was produced by Don Weiner and Dave Harding and Rat Clark, all guys that I went to school with, and hosted by Stephen Colbert. And I wrote it. And it was, I always say in 1 week, we turned a football practice stadium into the Tony Awards. And we had, I can't possibly remember all the people who were in it, but Craig Bierko, Richard Kind, Greg Edelman, Brian Darcy James.
Wow.
Brad Hall and Julia Louis-Dreyfus and Seth Meyers sent stuff in. Just an amazing cast of people. Nancy Dussault, my darling Chicky sister, Nancy Dussault, who sang a song that she'd sung in the WAMU show in the 1950s, and Tony Roberts and Laura Innes, and just a spectacular group of people. And that was fun. Again, didn't make any money, but it was just to work with those people and to work in that atmosphere and to be writing jokes with Stephen Colbert. That was lots of fun.
Now, you've written for so many people in this business. I mean, coming to either New York or Los Angeles, you come in with great hopes and aspirations. How long were you in Los Angeles before the phone started ringing on a regular basis for your work?
Let's see. I had a real, again, life is never a straight road. I was doing very nicely when I first came out here. And then my mother got sick the first time. She had lung cancer, and I went home for a while. So I took myself out of the game for a while. And then coming back, I had to make up time, so, there was an awful lot of this, and fairly, this century, fairly recently, it suddenly has gotten, consistently, there's always a few things going on, and that makes me happy. And I'm also doing a lot of work with my husband, who is the most talented person I've ever met anywhere. I've never known anyone who has a mind like his. And so he's got a bunch of projects right now, and I'm helping him write some of them, and that's been lots and lots and lots of fun.
Now, the business obviously has changed a lot since we both got into it. What are some of the things that you love the most about the changes in the business, and what are the things that you absolutely abhor that have changed?
I love that I can be sitting here in my Christmas jammies, and we're doing this, I mean, I've been fascinated watching people at the worst time in our collective lives. Well, we're let's put on a show, and the barn is now suddenly your laptop or your iPad or your phone. When I talk to, I do a lot of lecturing and teaching to college kids and sometimes to high school kids, and I just tell them, you have 50 million more outlets than someone even 10 years ago had, certainly more than 20 years ago, and you just have to keep firing on all of those places, whether it's YouTube or Funny or Die or Instagram Live or Facebook Live or whatever it is. There are ways of getting yourself seen. Now the other side of that is when you put a video on YouTube, a billion other people are doing that at the same time. So there are many more opportunities, but there are many more people doing it. You just have to find a way to get seen.
Mm-hmm.
And there are always ways to do that. I see things that particularly younger people do on an iPhone that, is better production value than what was coming out of Universal in the 30s. It's spectacular, the things that can be done. And so, just do stuff, keep doing stuff, do it in your voice. Because if you don't do it in your voice, if you don't do it in a way that you're comfortable with, there's somebody else. I can't remember whose famous quote this was about, be your best self rather than be an inferior somebody else.
Judy Garland.
Right, of course, and that's just what we have to do. And I think, no surprise, there came a point at this ancient stage in my life where I finally stopped worrying about what I wasn't and became a little more comfortable with what I am. And
isn't that a great feeling?
Yeah, and it translated into my work, and it made my work better, and it made me better because I wasn't. I wasn't the kid who would let somebody steal 2 stories of mine and sell it to somebody else. I'm a nice person. I try to do work in kindness, but I also do not let people be mean and nasty and rotten around me or to anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
That's some of my proudest moments have literally just been, trying to stick up for people, particularly younger girls on staff or working on a show who are so afraid, and who have been mistreated over the years.
Well, of course, we've gone through this whole Me Too movement and everything. Do you think it's gotten a little bit easier, or is it still very difficult for women? You came into, I'm assuming, what was mostly a man's world at the time.
Staffs were always, the ratio of men to women was at least 10 to 1.
Mm-hmm.
I'm part of a documentary that I think is finally going to get released called The Girl in the Room, which was about just that invariably, if you were working on a sitcom in the, years before I got there, 50s, 60s, 70s, you'd be lucky if there would be one woman there. That Sally Rogers character in the Dick Van Dyke Show, and but now it's much, much, much better. There's more parity. It's far from perfect, but we are seeing all types of representation that are long overdue, whether it's LGBTQI people or younger people. I'd like to see a little more representation of slightly older people, and by that I mean anybody over 25. But,
you and me both, yes.
I'll know that soon. But but yeah, I mean, it's never exactly where it should be, but it's better. It's certainly better than it was, a decade ago.
Now, in addition to this great career that you've had as a writer, you've also had a very successful career as a cabaret entertainer. Do you love that medium of just being up there and being yourself?
I love it. Richard, it's a funny thing. When I came out here, because when I lived in Chicago, I was a writer and a performer. When I came out here, I was essentially told by an awful lot of people, you're a good writer and you're much too ugly to be a performer, so just stop performing and keep writing.
No one actually said that to you.
Honestly, lots and lots of people, lots and lots of people said it. And I believed that for a very long time. And then a television star I was working with, who we shall not name, this person invited me to write them a cabaret act. And it was a bit of a nightmare. And September 11th kept this act from ever happening. And while I was doing it, and then, we all had to go through 7/11. I'm doing it now, 9/11. If I said 7/11, I'm going to hit myself with a frying pan.
I knew what you meant, 9/11.
I can't believe I said, see, it's happening. The brain is starting to go. But no, 9/11 happened, and I enjoyed writing the act for this person. I had done it for some other people, and I had been talking about doing it myself for a very long time. I can't believe I said 7/11. And I just thought, okay, I'm going to do this for one night and see what happens. And there was someone in the audience in my first show who invited me to be an opening act for Michael Feinstein at a party in someone's house, and it was a benefit, an AIDS for LA benefit, and things like that kept happening, and so I started performing, and then I was spending some time in London because that's where my husband is based a lot of the time, and I started performing there, and performing there is just delightful, really, really, really delightful. And the interesting thing about performing in that part of the world is I didn't know anybody. So other than, my husband, there wasn't going to be anyone there in the audience that I knew had to be nice because they knew me.
Now, how did that audience find you?
You know this. The show is hard. Plugging the show is really hard. So I worked really, really, really hard to,
get the word out.
Get the word out, advertise, do, any little, plugging of it that I could, go to every open mic in the world.
Now, I want to go back for a moment when you, and no names, please, no names. When you talked about working with this person, that was a nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
Was it a nightmare because of that person's insecurity, or was that person just naturally a nasty person?
I don't know that person well enough to really answer that question. I know that this person never fully paid me the money we had agreed on. And I think being a very, very powerful person in television was used to, being rewarded for bad behavior, which unfortunately happens a lot in this industry.
It's funny because, I'm going to, forgive me, everybody. I think that we've gone down the path that we've gone for the past 4 years is because this person has gone through his entire life without boundaries being put on them. And I heard a story once about a major star. I won't mention any names either. And this was a conversation that I had with her son, where she was nasty to everybody that she came in contact with. And someone once asked her why she did it. And she says, because I can. And there are certain people that go through life, and I think that their whole modus operandi is to push as many buttons as they possibly can, just to see how far they can get. And I'm sure you've dealt with that a lot in this business. What are your methods of getting through those situations instead of letting it get to your core?
You have to respectfully make a boundary, and just, lots of people like chaos, and I had a boss once who had a big, I always used to think of Noah and the Ark. He had a big metal pole, and he would stomp it on the floor, walking up and down the hallway, just screaming, "You're shit. Everything you do is shit. None of you have any talent. You're all going to be fired." And that made him happy. And that certainly, I don't know if it made our work worse, but it certainly didn't make it better. And there were marks in the wall where studio executives, there was this one studio executive who threw things against the wall and liked to try to break through, into the next office if possible, but at least crack the wall somewhere. And, there's a ton of money on the line in this and many, many other businesses. Mm-hmm. And there are lots of people who somehow manage to convince other people that their way is the right way, and they cannot be stopped in any of their desires. And often that means treating people badly. I'm too old for that. Mm-hmm. I expect people to be treated well. That doesn't mean that you disregard bad behavior, but it also means you don't assume that everybody is horrible and that you're going to break them down because that'll make you feel better. That just makes you, a bigger ass, Well,
let me ask you this: with everything that you have done, what is the one thing that you haven't done that is still on your bucket list?
Played Mama Rose in Gypsy.
To all the producers. And when she does it, I'm going to put my hat in the ring. I want to play Herbie opposite your Mama Rose.
My dad's name was Herbert.
Yeah.
My dad was Herbert. And so I have always thought of him with that. He was a little stronger than that Herbie, but he was every bit as decent. And there's tons of things I want to do. I've never had. I've one or two great scripts that are in the trunk that I'd like to see get produced somewhere. I'd love to be in a show in the West End. I'd like to do my cabaret show in New York, which I've never done yet.
Well, I was going to ask, when is that going to happen? After this is over, we got to make it happen.
I was going to do it this year, and,
Did you have a venue lined up?
I did. I was talking to some places and was very excited and, wanted to bring Groovy Shelly to New York. And maybe after we all get our vaccine.
And have you taken the show to other cities in the United States?
Oh, yeah, Chicago and London and Belfast and San Francisco. And for some reason, just whenever I'm in New York, I'm working there as a writer. And I'd love, it would be heaven to work there as a performer.
So how are you going to be spending the holidays this year?
Me and my husband and TiVo. I'm going to make him a nice dinner. And I'm going to feel very, 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 very blessed that the two of us are together.
Well, I want to tell you, I am very blessed that you and I are together right now. Our time is up. We're literally...
You'll never get away
from me. Before we go, however, I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. If you enjoyed the show, and I hope you did, and if you haven't done so already, please go to my website, richardskipper.com, sign my guest book with your thoughts about the show. That helps to book the show in other markets. I also want to let you know that tomorrow afternoon at 5 o'clock New York time, 2 o'clock Shelly's time, I'm going to be interviewing Cissy Wellman. Her father was William Wellman, who won the first Academy Award for Wings, also wrote the original screenplay for A Star is Born. Incredible career.
Wow.
And Cissy has had an incredible career. I'm reading her book, which is so incredible. They say I come from Hollywood royalty, so where's my crown? Many of us in this business want to know where our crown is, but tune in tomorrow and find out where it is. I also end every show by asking everyone to go out and do something nice for somebody else without expecting anything in return. Go to your Facebook friends list, and the fourth name that pops up today, give that person a call. Let them know what they mean to you. Not an email, not a text, not a private message, but a phone call. Now, Groovy Shelly, I'm going to give you the final word, and then we've got a special Christmas gift that I got from you this morning that I'm going to share with everybody. I think you know what it is.
Okay.
I asked for it because I think it's the right timing for today. I'm going to give you the final word. Anything you want to say about anything that we talked about that you want to expound upon, anything that we didn't talk about that you wish we had, or just any message that you want to put out to everybody at this time. And I want to thank you for all the gifts that you've given to the world and all the gifts that you're going to continue to give. I love you so much. Thank you.
I love you too. And that's so kind of you to say. Respect and compassion. We need it so desperately. We need to counteract the cruelty that has, been so much a part of our lives over the past half decade. And create what makes you happy, create in your own voice. And please, 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 we're very close to everyone getting this vaccine. Wear a mask, wash your hands. And as I always say, wash your hands constantly and laugh as much as you wash your hands, and we'll be okay.
Amen. I love you.
Christmas 2020 is not the year for a big Christmas, but if your heart's in the right place and the people you love are safe, it might be the perfect year for a merry. Have yourself a merry little Christmas. Let your heart be light. Next year, all our troubles will be out of sight. Have yourself a merry little Christmas. Make the Yuletide gay. Next year, all our troubles will be miles away. Once again, as in olden days, happy golden days of yore. Faithful friends who are dear to us will be near to us once more. In a year, we all will be together. If the fates allow. Until then, we'll have to muddle through somehow. So, have yourself a merry